Hello and welcome to Behind the Mic Live. I am G, your Rockstar Speakers Coach, and I interview incredible coaches, public speakers, and authors who are really, making rock star moves in the industry and channeling their inner rock star. So today, my rock star guest is Julie Brown. She is a networking coach, keynote speaker, and an author. So please welcome to Behind the Mic Live, Julie Brown.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, how are you? I
I'm great.
apologize. We had Wi-Fi went out, so I had to reset the Wi-Fi, but we are up and rocking. So let's go. Yeah. So who is Julie?
Middle child of three girls.
Okay.
I think that says everything about why I'm a professional speaker because I was a middle child. No one listened to me for my entire childhood. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get you all back. I'm going to get paid to talk.
And how did you find your voice when it comes to creating your being a public speaker?
I don't think anybody ever says, "Oh, you know what? I want to be a public speaker." I was asked to speak.
Okay.
On my topic of expertise, networking. And at that point, I was a coach. I was a business development strategist. Networking was a big piece of my strategy for my clients. And I was like, I'm not a speaker. This is not what I do. I'm a consultant. I'm a strategist. And I said no, which is so crazy. So I said
Really?
no to this speaking opportunity.
Okay.
And I was like, nope. And thankfully, that person, her name was Mary Louie. Thankfully, that person wouldn't take no for an answer and kept coming back and was like, I really need you to speak about this topic. And then I spoke about it once and I never stopped talking about it. And then I started talking so much and speaking so much that I actually dissolved my consultancy. And now I speak full time.
Wow.
As a profession.
So how do you, what are like some tips you have for public speakers out there that may be facing imposter syndrome or maybe nervous before they go on stage? What's like your go-to? How do you get into that rock star mindset before
Well,
you
I
go on
don't think
stage?
anybody doesn't get nervous. I think
Mhm.
if you don't get nervous, you don't
Mhm.
care enough about the audience. Like,
Yes.
and so when I started thinking like, okay, this is going to be my profession, I really need to get good at this because I never did Toastmasters or any
Okay.
other formal training.
Mhm.
I started speaking about the thing that I was
Mhm.
passionate about, and people started asking me if I would talk more about it. So I didn't have any formal training, and I became a scholar of other speakers.
Okay.
I
Okay.
spent I spent hours watching TED Talks. I spent
Okay.
hours on YouTube watching keynote speeches and literally
Mhm.
like, writing down like this is what I liked about their cadence, about how they use
Mhm.
how they use their body, how they moved around the stage. So I became really good at figuring out what worked on stage.
Right.
And then I had to figure out how I would make that work for me, like what I was comfortable with, because there's so many different styles of speaking. Like I'm a very specific style of speaking. So if you go to a
Mhm.
conference and you have keynote speakers from the morning through the afternoon into the end note,
Right.
they're all going to have their own different style. So you
Right.
figure out what your style of speaking is. And that comes with practice. And so one of the most brutal things I did very early on in my speaking career, 8 years ago, when I first started,
Okay.
was I had all of my first speeches, like that first year, professionally videographed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I
Yes.
watched them, no matter how brutal it was, because it is
Yes.
brutal, because we all hate our face and we all hate our voice. But I watched and said, I realized when I was umming, I realized when I was
Mm.
tired. Because you
Yes.
don't realize how exhausting public speaking is, how much of your own energy you use. And so I then became a scholar of myself. Like, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And
Right.
just practice, practice, practice. And I have an office. I have an office. I'm in my office now, and I have a big
Mhm.
couch that sits opposite side of my desk. And I would put my two big dogs on the couch.
Yes.
And they would sit there and I
Yes.
would give that speech over and over again. And the reason why it was important to have the two dogs there is because they have eyes. And I was
Yes.
learning how to make eye contact while I was
Yes.
speaking. But it was literally just, I mean, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice,
Practice,
practice.
practice, practice. Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I love the idea that you recorded all your shows, not just
it was bad. It
the
was
big ones,
hard.
the first ones,
Mm-hmm.
and watched them and looked at it as a learning lesson. This is what artists do on the road. They'll
Right.
watch their first shows and then go,
Yeah.
"Well, that was good, but we can change this." So,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the quality? I believe everybody has rock star qualities, right? What do
Right.
you think is your number one rock star quality?
Humor.
Yes. Okay.
Um, so, and I think, and
Okay.
that is, I have always been a very sarcastic, witty, very fast person
Yes.
as far
Yes.
as like ad libbing. Like that is inside of me. That comes from childhood trauma. That comes from,
Yep.
who I am. And so that's what I lean into when I'm on the stage. Networking can be
Mhm.
a it could be a very boring topic. Okay. It could be a very boring topic, networking. And every single time I give a speech, which is about once a week in front of a major audience, everybody says it was like watching a stand up comedian and a professor at the same time.
That's perfect. Yes. Yes. Continue. Yes.
And one thing that and maybe humor isn't your thing. Maybe your thing is like moving people to places they haven't been before. I'm not moving anybody. Nobody is crying during my speeches, okay? That is not where that's
Right.
not where
That's
my talents lie. If
right.
I tried to do that, I would bomb miserably. So maybe humor is yours. Maybe yours is tear jerking. Maybe yours is your way to break down complex topics into really manageable bites of information. Like you have to figure out how you excel at talking.
Yeah. Your signature sound. I mean, think about like you're saying going on a show with many different speakers
Yeah,
presenting. It's like going to a festival and having 20 bands play. You
exactly.
know, every band
Exactly.
has their own sound. There's something unique about it, the way they dress, the way they
Yep.
sing.
I
Yeah.
was recently keynoting a conference in New Orleans, and there were
Okay.
speakers all throughout the day. And these are high caliber speakers. We were
Mhm.
all brought there through a speakers bureau. These are high caliber speakers.
Mhm.
And the first gentleman who spoke, he was funny and he was fast like I am. And then the woman after him, she was slow and she was almost like melodic.
Mm. Okay.
And I akined it to the first speaker was like seeing a pop band. And the
Okay. Yep.
second speaker was like relaxing into a classical music show. Like,
Yes.
and they were
Yes.
both wildly effective and so different from each other.
Yes. Yeah. How would you describe your show? Like a music genre?
That's a great question. I would say I would like to say EDM, but I don't think that's right.
Okay. No,
Because it's just like it's
because
one
it has a
hit
rhythm. It
after
has a
another. Like
rhythm, a
you have to,
cadence.
like there's a cadence to how I talk and how I
Yeah.
move. And I think EDM is very much that, like that driven cadence that you like if you're riding a bike to
Yeah.
EDM or you're running to EDM, you know where your footfalls are.
And
You
it
know?
has crescendos and decrescendos, and it
Yeah,
builds up. A lot of people think EDM is just the same beat over and it's really taking the audience on a journey. It's like
yeah,
going on. So you're giving the audience all these different, ideas because you're
yeah,
taking them on a journey. So let's talk about your coaching, your circles, and how can people expand their networks. And I have like two questions here. Is one is I know everybody on LinkedIn is like, you need this many followers, you need this many and that. And I want to hear your thoughts on that. But also
mhm,
I listened to your audiobook and
mhm,
I love what you say about, well, what you say in the first chapter. I'll let you explain, but I want to
yeah,
know more about how you build your networks. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think in the sort of our world of social media where you aren't considered important or an influencer unless you have so many followers and so many
Right.
connections, that's not the way networking works. Like
Right.
networking is much more about quality over quantity,
Yes.
for a number of different reasons. One, you cannot manage 5,000 relationships effectively. You
Right.
can't.
Right.
So think about it. Like if you had 5,000 relationships and they were all at the same strength and you had to manage them all, you would burn out and you would fail at
Yeah.
managing those relationships.
Yeah.
So if you think about your network as you're strategically building relationships, you are building relationships at a pace in which they can grow and they can become stronger while also maintaining the relationships you already had. Like slow and steady wins the race with networking, because you want to be able to maintain some level of connection with a number of the people in your network at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing about, so that chapter that you listened to, that first audio chapter that I did, was I had spent some time in South Africa in 2019, and this was when I was, thinking about writing the book, and I was looking at communities differently. And so when I was on safari in South Africa, I started looking at the groups of animals. So like the herds of elephants and the prides of lions, and how zebras, which they're pronounced zebras in South Africa.
Zebras, right. Yes.
They can grow. They're a group of zebras is called a dazzle, which I think is amazing. And there'll be thousands of people of them.
Wow.
And each of these, groups of animals, their network, their size, whether it's a pride or a herd or a dazzle, is what keeps them safe in this really like competitive, tough environment. So I started thinking about like, well, what is the right size for the amount of people we have to have around us? And it is like the amount of people where you can maintain really, really close relationships, which is like your top 5, which I'm sure your audience has heard you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And then what is that next circle around us? And then what is that next circle? And then what is that next circle? And what is the right number of people to have in your network? So I started thinking about relationships completely differently after that trip, and sort of the role of relationships so we're not in the African bush, like, but we are trying to survive in
a competitive environment.
In a competitive environment to grow our career. So what is the right number of relationships? But not only that, but like, what are we giving those relationships? Each of those animals in that group had a role. Like, what is your role in your own network? Like, your network is only just there for you. Like, what are you doing as a positive part of somebody else's network?
Wow, that really got me thinking. And I actually created the list, the top 5, 1,500. And it really got me thinking. It was like, okay, I mean, there's certain people on LinkedIn that I really connect with. There's certain people I was on your show before. There's some that you're on the same frequency. Yeah, and I think when you're on the same frequency, you shouldn't ignore that. And it's like, this is somebody that, this, like you're saying with the animal kingdom, it doesn't just happen overnight. You either click with people or you don't. So I love this idea of having a network and expanding. I love how you use the idea of the circles and how they interact and everything. I want to know more about too. You're working on your next book.
Yes.
So let's hear what you can share about your next book.
Yeah. So I speak to a lot of colleges and universities, a lot of, large stages at colleges and universities. So this is Generation Z that I'm speaking to when I'm at colleges and university. Everybody in college right now is Generation Z. So Generation Z is born between 1997 and 2012. So they're like between 12 and 27 years old or something like that. Anyways, I don't know. Don't quote me, because it's like 1997 and 2012, I think, is the ages.
We're pre-iPhone.
I started thinking about, when I was speaking to students, how many of them said to me, I didn't realize that I could network like this in college. I didn't realize how important it was to network in college. And I started getting really sort of aggravated that we don't offer networking classes and skills and how to
Yeah.
colleges and university students. Because if
Yeah.
we know that 85% of jobs are filled through networking, why aren't we giving them this crucial career skill while they're learning all of the other things that apply to their major, the degree they're going to graduate with? So that was the first part. The second part was, I don't have my own children. So many of the children in my life, whether it be my niece, my nephew, my cousin's kids, they're all Gen Z, and they are
Okay.
all wonderful, wonderful children. And
Mm-hmm.
I started digging into the stereotypes of Gen Z.
Okay.
And we've been naming generations since the 1400s. We've been naming generations and stereotyping generations since the 1400s. So stereotyping a generation is nothing new, but I have
Okay.
never seen so much negative press about
Yeah.
a generation as I have Gen Z.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, like, why is this happening? Why are they the most stereotyped generation ever? And why are there, like, the only positive stereotypes that are associated with them are not written about in major news outlets? They're usually written about in college and university magazines.
Right.
Every headline is they are unprepared, they are the loneliest generation ever, they are entitled, they're too woke, they're like, it's all of these negative things. And I was
Right.
like, well, maybe number one, maybe we're looking for confirmation bias, but number two,
Mm.
they are children. Our jobs as the previous generations was to help them navigate
Just like the
into
herds.
the
Yes.
world. So they haven't failed. We have failed as the previous
Yes.
generations. But not only that, like, this generation, we could all work from home. It didn't affect us as much as those pivotal years where you're learning, and they'd spent so much of it. You learn a lot of social skills while you're in school, and that was taken
Yes.
away from them for a number of years. And so we are just starting to understand the ramifications of learning over Zoom and being taken out of that social context for so many years.
Mm.
And I really want to look at the stereotypes of Gen Z. I want to help them prepare for their careers, starting in college, starting in high school, understanding the value of networking and building a network. But I also want to upend the stereotypes and say, if these are the stereotypes, then how do we use them for good? How do we take a stereotype and
Right.
turn it into a superpower? So
Right.
that is where I'm at. In the book is in its infancy. I've written like 2 chapters. So
Nice.
but that's where this book is. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just a networking book. It is
Okay.
a why are we doing this to these kids book kind of thing.
I think that you're onto something, because we do have the tendency to, even growing up, my parents were like, grandparents. Back in my day, we
Right.
didn't have that, and I
Oh, and
still
it's
find
always
myself
these
doing that.
kids these
I
days.
didn't
It's
have iPhone growing up. You guys
yeah,
have it made. But then it also, you do have a really, really good point that it's several years of where the most forming years of being around people, even if it's just
right.
in school and being at bars and clubs and
Yeah.
grocery stores and things, they literally were isolated. So how does that,
Yeah.
they
And
have to, yeah,
that isolation further drove them
yeah,
into social media.
yeah,
And,
makes sense.
this
Yeah,
is where everybody says they're addicted to technology. Well, for fuck's sake, they spent 2 of their learning years having to do it through technology. You needed technology in order to learn. So don't lambast them
yeah,
for their
yeah,
addiction to the only thing that connected them to the outside world
yes,
and to
exactly.
institutes of learning.
Exactly. If we had the technology growing up, we wouldn't have carried around those encyclopedias.
Right? I had the encyclopedias
I
in my,
know.
and that's another thing. You only learned about what the Encyclopedia Britannica wanted you to
Yeah,
learn
I know.
about, you know?
I was 20 years old. Yeah, I know. But see, okay, this is a really good point. I think as older generations, we can have the tendency to go, well, you know what, these guys, they just don't get it. They're not focused. Like,
Right,
you really, I'm really curious to hear what your perspective is on that. And I do agree. The universities, people that run the universities, if you're watching this, you need to add networking people skills, pitching, public speaking, all these things that students really need to do when they get out into the workforce.
There was a
To the
recent
curriculum.
survey. There was a recent, survey of college and university students, and more than 50% said they wished they had received more training in networking. Like,
Yeah.
they're asking for it. And
And
so
this
don't say these kids can't handle face-to-face interactions when they are asking for the training and you're not giving it to them.
Yes, exactly. Wow, this is great. So, how can people work with you? How can they book you? How can they get your book? How can they become a coaching client?
Yeah, so my book is on the first book, the Shit Works book, the
Yep.
first external networking network building book
Mhm.
is on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, so you can just look it up, The Shit Works. And then
Okay.
I spend, like, we started this event, I spend most of my working time speaking on stages. So
Mhm.
whether that is large conferences or corporate sales meetings or employee resource groups, where the topic of networking and relationship building, whether internal or external, because we didn't even get into internal networking. We'll have to have a second show on that.
Right, right. Well, I'll do a second show on that.
Like, literally the importance for employee success, retention, happiness, and company profitability tied to internal networking structures, which not a lot of companies offer their employees. So we'll get to that in a different session. So I speak about networking for increased influence and success and happiness.
Mhm.
So if anybody wants to book me, talk to me about bringing that to their company or to their conference, they can just go to my website, Julie Brown, BD, so B as in boy, D as in dog.com.
Mhm.
They can see my speaker reel. They can go down to the bottom and just fill out a form that is like, I'm curious about working with you. Another thing, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that every Wednesday at 1:45, so today is a Wednesday, so in
Yep.
hours, my weekly newsletter will come out, and it is one of the most fun things I do in
I
my
love your newsletter. I love your networking 911 videos that
yeah.
you put up on LinkedIn. I mean, they are so good. They stop me in my tracks. I'm like, "Oh, what am I gonna learn today?" I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, this you
The
gotta connect with
newsletter
yeah.
is
Yeah.
like such a sweet thing to me. And this is unheard of. And I'm sure you understand the sort of the statistics behind newsletters. My open rate for my newsletter is 74%.
Oh, wow.
Just so
I
the
see it.
audience
Yeah.
understands, the open rate for an email newsletter
Yeah.
hovers around 8% or something.
8%. Yeah,
And I'm
exactly.
74% because it is
Yeah.
so fun and funny. And so you can also sign up for my newsletter, same website,
Yep.
juliebrownbd.com, go all the way down to the bottom, and you can just put in your name and your email, and boom, you're on the website list, email list. I do not sell on that. It is
Yep.
literally just a story to brighten your
Yep.
day. This week's newsletter is about how my husband inadvertently got flagged for buying a murder cleanup kit.
Oh my god.
So you have to tune in to figure out how
Oh,
he got flagged for that.
well,
I'm still alive. I'm still alive. And yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn almost every day. I love it
yeah.
there. Reach out to me, send me a message, interact with me there. But yeah, those are pretty
Yeah.
much places to find me.
Yeah, well, I think this is like you said, your greatest rock star quality is your humor, and I think it translates in all the videos you do,
Yeah.
in the book, and in the newsletter. And before we go, I have to know, who is your favorite rock star?
I don't know. Oh, I think it changes from
Okay,
time
just
to time. But
talk music. Yeah,
recently, I
yeah.
never saw this coming. But recently, like, and by recently, I mean within like the last 2 years, I've been really into country music.
Okay, all right.
And so I would say the person I listen to the most, oh, it's probably a three-way tie. I got to be honest.
Okay, well, let's talk about all three. Yeah, that's
It's
fine.
either
Okay,
Jelly Roll, Zach Bryan, or
okay,
Chris Stapleton.
okay,
That's
all right.
probably like on my like heavy rotation in my Spotify list right now.
Why is it? What is it about their storytelling you think that draws you in? Like, because they have
Oh,
similar
well,
but different
yeah,
sounds.
Zach Bryan is a storyteller. Like,
Yeah.
he is a storyteller. He weaves like you listening to his songs is almost like listening to an audiobook. I like
Yes.
music.
Yes. Wow.
I love Jelly Roll because I love his story. I love that
Mhm.
at 40 years old, he was awarded the best new country artist, like at 40,
Right.
just
Right.
goes to show you're never too old to chase your dreams or for big
Yeah.
things to happen in your life. And Chris Stapleton is just like his voice is so great.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much heavy rotation right now for me.
Wow, this is great. Well, thank you so much for taking time. Everybody, connect with Julie here on LinkedIn. Connect at
Mhm.
juliebrownbd.com. I want to thank you again for being a guest. Apologize for the late start. You are a true rock star. Thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Okay. Until next time. Ciao. Cheers.